My girlfriend demanded I throw away my $10,000 comic collection before moving, and I said yes, then handed her a legal document that made her go white because hidden screenshots proved she was already planning to destroy everything. She was already planning which ones to destroy first. I did not know that when she smiled at me across the brunch table and called my $10,000 comic collection an embarrassment. I did not know it when she gave me the ultimatum. Throw everything away or she was not moving in. I did not know it when I drove her home in silence while she cheerfully filled every quiet moment with moving plans like the decision was already made. I found out 3 days later when my best friend sent me screenshots from his sister's group chat. Screenshots where my girlfriend's sister had written, in her own words, that Rachel was planning to spill wine on the most expensive pieces first. Make it look like a complete accident. Walk away clean. She was not asking me to choose. She had already chosen for me. She just needed to get through my front door first. So I called my attorney that same night. And when she showed up 3 days later smiling and carrying an expensive bottle of red wine, I reached into my kitchen drawer and handed her 40 pages of legal documentation and watched her face go completely white. Let me tell you how we got here. Because it did not start with an ultimatum. It never does. Rachel and I had been together for 2 years. She was sharp and driven and the kind of person who filled every room she walked into. I was building a life I was proud of. Stable career. My own house. And my collection. Vintage Marvel comics going back to my grandfather. First editions. Some worth thousands individually. Climate-controlled room. Custom shelving I built myself. Every piece catalogued, insured, and valued annually. It was the first thing anyone noticed walking into my house. Most people stood in the doorway for a full minute before saying anything. Rachel had stood in that doorway once, early in our relationship, and said it was incredible. She had asked about my grandfather. I told her the whole story. Every Sunday afternoon in his basement. The cedar chest. The careful wrapping. The way he had handed it to my father, who had handed it to me on my 22nd birthday and said, "This is not just paper. This is every Sunday afternoon we ever had together. Take care of it." She had listened with what looked like genuine warmth. Said she understood why it mattered. I think about that moment a lot now. Whether she meant it then and slowly changed. Or whether she was already calculating from the very beginning. I have never been able to decide which version is worse. The comments started around month 4. Small ones. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned a new piece. A suggestion that the collection room could become a home office. A look during my Friday sessions with my best friend Dave that communicated clearly she found it less than impressive. I told myself it was adjustment. 2 people with different tastes learning to fit together. I made excuses the way people do when they want badly to believe something is fine. Month 8 she suggested selling the less valuable pieces. I said no. Month 10 she mentioned her friend's husband had gotten into wine collecting. Was that not more sophisticated? Month 12 she asked thoughtfully whether I had considered what the collection room might look like as a proper guest room. Each comment small enough to dismiss alone. Together they were building something I did not want to name. Then came Sunday brunch. Her favorite restaurant. Corner table. She put her fork down and said, "There is just one thing we need to address before I move in." I said, "What's that?" She said, "The comics." Something went still inside me. She said, "They are embarrassing, Michael. They take up an entire room. If I am moving and they need to go." I said, "Those are worth over $10,000. She said, "Then sell them. Use the money for something that makes actual sense for 2 adults." I paid for brunch. Drove her home without a word. She filled the silence with cheerful logistics, what she would bring, what would go to storage, which of her furniture might work in the living room. Like it was already decided. Like we were simply handling details. She showed affection my cheek at her door. Said, "Let me know when you have made the right decision." Meaning her decision. The only one she had ever considered acceptable. I drove home. Sat in the collection room. Looked at my grandfather's first editions and thought about cedar chests and Sunday afternoons and a man who had loved me enough to preserve something across decades just so he could hand it to me. My phone buzzed. "Dave. Bro. Check this right now." A screenshot. His sister Jenny was in a group chat with Rachel's sister Amanda. Amanda had sent a message 2 days earlier. It said, "Rachel finally gave Michael the ultimatum. Once she moves in she is already planning to accidentally spill something on the expensive ones. Make them completely unsalvageable. Then he has no choice and she is not even the one who made it happen." I read it 3 times. More came through. Amanda again, she has figured out which ones are worth the most. Starting with those. Red wine. Maybe a humidifier left running. Make it look like negligence, not intention. Another message, she keeps telling him it is about maturity but it is about control. He spends money on something she had no part in and she cannot stand it. Once the comics are gone she redirects that budget toward things she actually has opinions about. One final message sent the morning after our brunch, he said he needs to think, which Rachel says means he is already caving. Give it a week and those comics are gone one way or the other. I sat in that room for a long time. The lighting exactly right. Every piece exactly where I had placed it. My girlfriend was not asking me to make a mature decision. She was planning to walk into my home and destroy something irreplaceable and perform grief about it to my face. She was going to look at me with wide eyes and say she was so sorry. Accidents happen. I called my attorney Monday morning. Sent him the full thread before the call connected. He reviewed everything and said, "This is documented premeditated destruction of property. We draft a cohabitation agreement requiring her to carry full financial liability for any damage to your belongings. She signs it and damages anything, you have immediate recourse. She refuses to sign, you have your answer." I said, "Draft it." Wednesday. I texted Rachel Wednesday morning. "I have made my decision. Come over tonight." She responded in 4 minutes. She was proud of me. She would bring wine to celebrate. She arrived glowing. Set the red wine on my counter. Looked toward the collection room with the expression of someone already mentally redecorating. She said, "So you are finally getting rid of them?" I said, "I have been thinking a lot about what you said. About making space. About over 18 partnerships." She said, "I am so glad. You are making the right choice for us." I reached into the kitchen drawer. Placed the document on the counter between us. 40 pages. Tab sections. Her name on the signature line on page 39. She said, "What is this?" I said, "A cohabitation property agreement. Financial liability for any deliberate damage to my belongings. Full replacement value. Sign this before you move in." She flipped through it. Her expression moved from confused to careful to something considerably harder. She said, "This says I am liable if anything happens to your comics." I said, "If anything is deliberately damaged?" "Yes." She said, "What if there is an accident?" I said, "Genuine accidents are covered by my homeowner's insurance. This only addresses deliberate damage. If you never plan to deliberately damage anything, you will never owe a single dollar. Very simple." She said, "Why would I deliberately damage your things? What are you implying?" I picked up my phone. Turned the screen toward her. Every screenshot. Every message. Amanda's words. "Wine on the expensive ones first. Make it look like negligence. Give it a week." I watched her face move through 4 expressions in 4 seconds. Surprise. Calculation. Fear. Then a cold, furious stillness. She said very quietly, "Where did you get those?" I said, "Your sister sent them to her friend group. Jenny happens to be Dave's sister. The world is considerably smaller than your plan required." She said, "Those are private conversations." I said, "Those are documented plans to destroy my property. Private does not mean free of consequences." She stood up. Said she had never actually been going to do it. Just venting to her sister. I had completely misread a casual conversation. I said, "Venting is I hate those comics. Planning is I will start with the expensive ones and make it look like an accident. You were not venting. You were organizing." She grabbed her bag. Said I was paranoid. Said I was destroying our relationship over a misunderstanding. Each sentence a different angle on the same message. Her behavior was not the problem. My response was. I said, "Sign the agreement or do not move in. Those are the options." She said, "I am not signing that." I said, "Then we are finished." She said what people always say when they have run out of actual arguments. "You are choosing comic books over me. Over everything we built." I said, "I am choosing not to share my home with someone who planned to destroy my grandfather's legacy and lie about it to my face. This is not about comics. This is about who you showed me you are." Then I showed her one final thing. The forwarding confirmation. Every screenshot sent to her mother. Her father. Her sister Amanda. Every word of her plan delivered to the people who raised her, while she was driving to my house with that bottle of wine. She whispered, "What did you do?" I said, "I made sure the people who love you know what you were planning. Same way I deserve to know." Her phone started ringing. Her mother's name on the screen. It rang out. Started again immediately. She left without another word. The door closed the way doors close when the person going through them has just lost something they cannot yet calculate the size of. I stood in my collection room. Every piece in place. Every light on. The wine she brought sitting completely untouched on my kitchen counter. My phone rang. "Dave." I picked up. He said, "You okay?" I looked at the shelving I had built with my own hands. I said, "Yeah. Actually, yeah." I had no idea what was coming next. Because that silence after the door closed was not an ending. It was Rachel deciding exactly how far she was willing to go. And the weeks ahead were about to show me things about people I had never fully understood before. Her mother called 20 minutes after Rachel left. She said, "Michael the first have seen the messages. I am deeply ashamed. We did not raise her to plan to destroy someone's belongings and deceive them about it. What she planned was completely wrong and I am sorry you had to find out this way." Her father called 20 minutes after that. Quieter but more direct. He said, "If you pursue legal action I will not stand in your way. What she planned was premeditated and dishonest and those are not values we raised her with." Even Amanda called. She said, I know my messages exposed this and I am sorry. Not because they were seen but because I was part of the planning. I enabled her. I helped her think this was reasonable. That makes me responsible too. Rachel tried calling 4 times that night. Then from a number I did not recognize. Then she sat in my driveway for 30 minutes visible on my security camera before finally driving away. She sent 11 text messages between 10 and midnight. I read every one. Responded to none. Blocked her before I went to sleep. 3 days later a letter arrived from an attorney. Rachel was intimidating to sue me for invasion of privacy and defamation. My attorney responded within 24 hours with full documentation of her plan, the agreement she had refused to sign, and a formal notice that any legal action would be met with a counterfiling for conspiracy to commit vandalism. Her attorney withdrew the threat 4 days later without comment. That same week Dave called. He said, "Jenny told me Rachel is telling people you fabricated the screenshots. Made them up because you wanted an excuse to break up and were too much of a coward to just end it directly." I said, "Her own sister sent them." Dave said, "I know. But she is telling everyone who will listen that Amanda is lying or the screenshots were edited." I said, "Let her tell it." Dave said, "You are not going to correct it publicly?" I said, "Anyone who matters will ask me directly. When they ask they get the full truth with original documentation and timestamps. People who believe her version without asking are telling me something important about themselves." 3 weeks later Rachel's closest friend Melissa reached out. She said the versions she was hearing did not match and she was not willing to pick a side without understanding what actually happened. I sent her everything. Original screenshots. Full metadata. The agreement Rachel refused to sign. The attorney exchange. Melissa called back within an hour. Her voice was quieter than before. She said, "I confronted Rachel directly. She admitted it. She said she was planning it but it was for your own good. That the comics were holding you back and sometimes people need help moving past their own limitations." I said, "Help? By destroying their property without their knowledge." Melissa said, "That is exactly what I said." She genuinely believes the intention makes the method acceptable. She cannot see it as manipulation because in her version she was acting out of love. A pause. "I do not know what to do with someone who thinks that way." I said, "I am not sure there is anything productive to do with it." Melissa stepped back from the friendship that week. Said she could not maintain closeness with someone who believed controlling a partner through deliberate deception was an expression of care. Over the following month Rachel's social circle quietly reorganized. Several friends distanced themselves after hearing the real story. A few remained loyal and made it visible. A small number tried to defend her directly. Said she meant well. Said I was being unforgiving about something that came from love. Every one of those people quietly left my life. Not dramatically. Just gone. Anyone who believed premeditated deception was acceptable when the intention was care was not someone whose presence added anything worth keeping. 1 month after the confrontation, security at my workplace called. Rachel was in the lobby refusing to leave without speaking to me. Against better judgment I went down. She had dressed carefully for this. That was the first thing I noticed. She had thought about what to wear the way she thought about everything. Strategically. With the desired outcome already decided before she walked through the door. I sat across from her in the lobby. Public space. Security visible. She said, "I am sorry. I was completely wrong. I should never have planned to destroy your collection." I said, "You are right." She said, "I was under enormous pressure. My lease. My job. Everything at once. I was not thinking clearly and I went about solving it in completely the wrong way." I let her finish. Then I said, "You just described my comics as a problem that needed solving. That tells me you still believe destroying them would have been a solution. You are sorry you were caught. You are not sorry for the plan." She said, "That is not fair." I said, "A genuine apology requires understanding what was wrong with what you did. Not simply that it failed." She stared at me. Then she said, "Fine. Keep your comics. Stay in that room with them forever. See if it is enough for you." There she was. The real version underneath all the careful preparation. Not changed. Not remorseful. Simply furious that she had not gotten what she wanted. Security walked her to the exit. She was added to the list of individuals not permitted in the building. 2 months later Dave sent me a screenshot. Rachel had started seeing someone new. Happy couple photographs. The caption said, "Finally found someone mature enough to put us first." I showed it to the woman I had been seeing for 3 weeks. Someone who had spent an hour in my collection room on our second date asking about the history of different publishing eras, the significance of specific artists, the stories behind each piece. Someone who had held my grandfather's first editions with the careful hands of someone who understood instinctively that some things carry weight beyond their material value. She looked at the screenshot. Said, "Your ex sounds absolutely exhausting." I said, "I almost let her move in." She said, "What stopped you?" I said, her own words. We got married a year and a half later. I proposed in the collection room. I had spent a week deciding where and kept arriving at the same answer. The room Rachel had wanted to empty. The room that had shown me everything I needed to know. My wife cried. She said it was the most perfect proposal because it was honest about who I actually was and who she was choosing when she chose me. The collection stayed. It grew. She brought her vintage record collection. Our interests lived side by side on adjacent walls without either of us ever asking the other to justify or reduce them. Rachel's new relationship ended within 8 months. She had tried to pressure him into giving up his motorcycle restoration hobby. He declined. She escalated. He ended things. She posted about men who refused to prioritize the people who loved them. The relationship after that lasted longer. The man had no particular interests of his own. He deferred to her on everything. By her standards he was perfectly mature. By most other standards he was simply absent as a person. That engagement ended when she discovered he had been conducting an entirely separate life outside her awareness. She posted about betrayal. About giving everything and being deceived. I read it and felt nothing in either direction. Not satisfaction. Not sympathy. Just the quiet recognition that her life had continued along its course and mine had continued along mine, and that the distance between those trajectories was exactly right. My daughter was born the year after our wedding. We started her own small collection immediately. Age-appropriate stories. Bright covers. She calls it the comic room, and on Sunday afternoon she sits on the floor beside me while I explain who each character is and why the stories matter, and I can hear my grandfather's voice somewhere inside my own. The collection is worth nearly $20,000 now. Something I will pass to my daughter if she wants it. And somewhere inside the continuation my grandfather is still sitting on a living room floor explaining why these particular stories are worth keeping. At Dave's wedding 3 years later, Rachel and I ended up at the same event. She found me at the bar. She said, "You look happy." I said, "I am." She said, "Is she okay with the comics?" That single question told me everything about where she still was after all this time. Still the same measurement. Still the same test. She had never moved past the framework. She had simply kept applying it to new people. I said, "She loves them. She has her own collection on the next wall." Something moved across Rachel's face I could not name. Then she said, "Good for you," in a tone that meant its opposite, and excused herself back into the crowd. I walked back to my wife, who was laughing with someone across the room. She saw me coming and made space without pausing her sentence. Just opened naturally, the way people do when someone belongs beside them without it needing to be announced. I did not look back. Here is what I know now. When someone plans to destroy the thing you love, they are not making a decision about the thing. They are making a decision about you. They are deciding the parts of you that exist without their permission are removable. That your history is an obstacle. That your inherited love is an inconvenience. That the version of you they want requires the erasure of the version of you that actually exists. The person who calls your passion childish is telling you your inner life is only valid when they have approved it. The person who plans to destroy what you love is telling you your past is only acceptable when it is invisible. And the person who dresses an ultimatum as concern for your growth is telling you your choices only count when they match theirs. My grandfather never asked permission to love what he loved. He simply loved it and passed it forward and trusted that the people worth sharing it with would recognize its value without being told to. He was right. It just took me longer than I would have preferred to find one of them. Some things are worth protecting at whatever cost is required. Not because of their financial value. Not because of their rarity. But because they carry the people who came before you and the Sunday afternoons that made you who you are. And the person who wants you to destroy them has already told you in the clearest possible language exactly what they intend to do with everything else that matters to you. Know that before you open the door. Because once someone is inside, the things they cannot control are always the first things they come for.